Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's discussion of strategies to enhance student engagement in an online learning environment. You'll notice the cog on the left in that picture is to address the idea of the importance of engaging the students in the learning activity. My name is William Mosier. I'm professor of child development in the School of Health Sciences at Istanbul Galician University and director of research at the Linda A. Cohen Center for the Study of Child Development and Behavioral Health Clinic in Dayton, Ohio. Well, in order to address how we can enhance and support student learning, we have to address this leading question, this question that kind of will jump out at us a bit. How can we best support self-directed learning of college students? And how can we best support the collaborative learning opportunities? Because self-directed learning and collaborative learning lead to greater content mastery, especially in an online environment. The data in the literature is well documented as reinforcing the importance of helping students to accept responsibility for their own learning and to encourage students to work together to solve problems, to understand the material better. Well, some starting tips are to remember that whole idea that self-directed learning must be the focus of your online course. You want to encourage the students to work independently, or if they choose, in small groups. You want to ensure that your course design allows for students to find what they need and succeed while they're working independently or working together in a small group. Certainly, the course syllabus is absolutely vital for you to have in a format that is easy for students to understand. It's an absolute critical resource for your students. So you need to have the syllabus, identify a clear schedule, and you need to stick to that schedule. You need to have clear grading rubrics, and those reading rubrics need to include time limits and deadlines that students can easily access. So when professors ask me, how do I come up with or create grading rubrics? Well, the beauty of the internet these days is that there are scores and scores of sample rubrics for college instructors that you can download and then edit and adjust to meet the needs of your particular course content. Very important is to avoid overloading students with excessive amounts of asynchronous assignments. There are certainly an important use of time to include activities as asynchronous assignments, but you don't want to overburden the students with those asynchronous assignments. More on that later. You want to also ensure that your students know how they can get IT support if they're having difficulty accessing the course material or accessing the requirements or the rubrics and the course syllabus. Promoting student engagement. How do we do that in an online environment? Well, spaced repetition rather than long lectures are certainly more palatable for students. You should keep your lecturettes to a maximum of 20 minutes and then rely on other activities to keep the students engaged. Ensure the students are connected with each other as well as with the course material. And these online activities could be using breakout rooms where you pose a question that students then discuss in small groups and breakout rooms. Certainly allow for frequent breaks if it's a 3-hour online course. And as you're going to see me modeling in this class today, use learning games that help pull the students into active engagement. Another factor that's important to consider is using discussion boards where students discuss the topics of the course and have that be a way where the students connect with each other and stay actively engaged with the course material. You need to make sure your course provides a supportive emotional interaction for the students. That means you need to make sure that exams and quizzes will minimize cheating behavior, because that risk of having exams that are have a high chance of students not passing really provides a lot of emotional stress, especially in an online environment. So instead of using exams and quizzes to minimize this cheating behavior, you can measure participation by using course projects, which we'll discuss later, having grading for the discussion board participation, using a rubric to grade student participation, certainly having their attendance in your synchronous part of the course as part of their grade for the course, as well as evidence of active engagement with the material in the course. The case method approach for online learning works well in an asynchronous environment. During your synchronous portion of the course, you can teach a case, but keep your lecturette brief, and then facilitate discussion of the case, having the students break up into small groups during the synchronous part of your course. And then you can make this an assignment where in their small groups, they have to interact with each other to then respond to the case study in a way that will help facilitate some sort of resolve of the issue that's being brought up in the case study. And they can do that then the following week as a group presentation. You want to make sure you build in reflective tasks so that students not only understand the importance of doing the assignment, but reflect on how they're doing the assignment and how the way they're communicating with each other is impacting on enhancing or not the learning in the group. You want to humanize this online environment. You want to encourage one-on-one instructor-learner engagement and engagement between the students. You want to build an active learning community by encouraging the students to work together collaboratively on projects. You want to provide ongoing feedback during their collaborative exercises. It's particularly easy to do during the synchronous section because you as the instructor can go into the different breakout rooms to see how the students are problem solving together. You want to definitely create an open forum discussion board where participation is a component of the grading process, and you want to make sure you have created a rubric for participation that you can use for grading. Now, what kinds of topics would be brought up on the discussion board? Well, in the course, if it's a typical 16-week semester, I typically have 14 or 15 topics from the textbook that I want students to discuss. And then I typically have a couple weeks where students are expected to bring up a subject that seems to be gnawing at them about something related to the course content. And then they bring that up, discuss it, mention it, and then they have to respond to at least one of their colleagues and their discussion board statement as well. You want to mix learning experiences to keep the students actively engaged. So it cannot be overemphasized that you want to keep the lectures short. Instead of long, drawn-out lectures, refer the students to other online resources that you can even tie to graded activities. You can have them watch a YouTube and then report on what they learned, what their understandings are from that YouTube that you assigned to the class. Also, you want to assign course projects based on student-identified issues, not on issues that you think are important, but rather let the students decide what they think is important for them to explore. In other words, you've got to keep the learning fun. Establish a sense of community by setting a tone of excitement for what you're helping the students learn. Support students who are apprehensive about participating by ensuring that activities are fun instead of tedious. One way to do that is by incorporating learning games into your course. This is the way I incorporate the learning games. I take simple multiple choice questions that are in the instructor material that's provided by the textbook publishers, or I create questions of my own, and I ask students to answer the question, not competitively, but just to enhance their engagement. I ask them to consider, according to Eric Erickson, children who are abused by parents are likely to what? And most often students will pick be abusive themselves, rather than the correct answer, suffer mistrust. So it's a great tool, having these learning games, to bring the students into the topic and help them understand the topic more fully than just memorizing information for a test. You've got to stop thinking that you need to control the students. Help the students embrace self-directed learning. You want to stimulate active involvement by encouraging the students to ask you questions. I've had other professors tell me, how do you handle students who keep interrupting your lecture by asking questions? I frankly encourage that in my courses. So I do not see it as a problem for students to demonstrate their active engagement by asking a question when something that I've just said in the lecturette has confused them or gave them a thought about some other question related to the topic that they want to ask about. You want to enhance learner engagement by encouraging the students to create their own contracts for what they're going to agree to do in exchange for a grade. So that begs the question, what is a learning contract? A learning contract is simply a written agreement that's composed by the student that provides details of what the student is going to learn, showing how the student is going to accomplish that learning, and then determining some criteria for evaluating and that typically is by using a rubric for grading the activity. Then the student will get as their grade for the course. Now, there are some positives of learning contracts. Learning contracts can be a real useful way to bridge the differences that exist in learning needs, learning differences that are particularly noticeable in an on-learn environment with college students. Learning contracts can spark students' deeper involvement and commitment in the learning process because they pick a topic that they want to study and they're committing to how they're going to explore the topic in order to achieve their grade for the course. Students tend to be really confused about this whole idea of introducing them to contracting for a grade. So you want to provide a sample learning contract, maybe several, for students to use as a model for them to create their own learning contract. Now, where would you get these sample contracts? There are scores and scores of learning contracts online available. You just Google learning contracts for college students, and you can see how the options that appear for you can be adapted by you to create a model for a learning contract that works for you and works for your students. Learning contracts can increase accountability and certainly provide a specific plan for how the student will show evidence that they're learning the material for the course. So what are the components of a learning contract? Well, a learning contract definitely has to identify the student's needs in relationship to the objectives of the course, specific learning resources that the student's going to use, the specific product that the student is going to offer you as evidence of their learning. Always it has to include the completion date, and then the assessment criteria for how they're going to be graded for their assignment, for their participation, for what they produce for the course. As a sample learning contract, and again, you can certainly just go to the internet to find examples. But as you see here, I have, by signing this learning contract, I commit to the following. And then you have the student identify their learning objective, that is what they're going to learn, the activities that they're going to do in order to accomplish their objective, and how they're agreeing to be evaluated for the project or product that they're going to give you. And then, of course, you have to make sure in the learning contract that there is a completion date, because I can tell you right now, there will be students who don't do the assignment by the completion date, and then they will want an extension. And you can have in the rubric some sort of decrease of grade based on number of days late, for example. After the student has agreed to their date for when their contract is due, they have to sign it and date it, and then you, as the instructor for the course, sign it and date it as well. Learning through fun is absolutely important. You want to help the students enjoy your class. So you want to keep your class playful. I do that by using polling slides, roughly every 3 to 5 slides, where I ask students questions. I survey learners to assess their understanding periodically throughout the semester, and I often use the textbook quiz questions as the way to stimulate engagement in the course. You can also encourage the learning in small groups where the students will work together to solve a problem, because the research is very clear that transfer of learning from working memory to long-term memory is enhanced when students are collaboratively problem solving and sharing their ideas with each other. So you want to use games to maintain interest. You want to encourage small group activities. If a student doesn't want to work in a group, I always honor that and allow them to do their activity, their project for the course on their own. Include a course project because it's a valuable way to get students to be more engaged, whether it's through group learning or individual learning. When they pick the topic that they want to study related to the course, then it will help them be much more engaged in the learning material. So again, this is modeling an example of how every few slides I have a question related to what the topic is for the day. For example, when would it be least traumatic for parents to leave their infant with a family friend for a long weekend? I can tell you almost to 90% of the students will say 1 year. And then it's a perfect opportunity to hone in on the importance of understanding when individuation occurs, helping the students learn that no, the first 3 months of life is when it doesn't matter who is providing gentle, appropriate touch with an infant. They just need to have someone do it. It doesn't matter if it's a family friend or the parent. Class participation that can enhance student engagement is the hardest thing to nurture in an online environment. So what are some things you can do to stimulate that? Assign videos. Assign internet videos that the students have to watch before class, and then they can, during the discussion board, talk about what they learned from that video, or you can use it as a small group activity during the synchronous part of your course. Your goal is to nurture self-paced, proactive, and self-directed learning. The responsibility for mastering the course material has to be maintained in the hands of the learner, each student, because ultimately, most effective learning is learning that is self-directed. And that's what leads to greater motivation to learn and greater retention of the material that you want the students to learn. So you want to provide a sense of physical presence, even though you're not physically present more than roughly 2 hours and 50 minutes a week. Enhance that sense of your presence by recording brief announcements weekly for your students. That kind of reduces students' sense of isolation. I will record audio or video announcements reminding students of what their requirement is for that particular week. And these short audio or video messages provide a sense of guidance that supports students' understanding of the assignments. Reiterate assignment criteria, reiterate deadlines with clear and concise expectations. Make it clear how the students will be graded for their efforts and their participation in the course. You've got to keep a balance of active facilitator of learning and active participant along with the students in the learning process. In other words, you want to serve as a role model for active engagement in the learning process. The big question. To have office hours or not to have office hours, that's a big question. You have to, for yourself, decide the criteria for when and how you can be contacted by the students. I personally allow the students to use WhatsApp to contact me anytime, and they do not abuse that. As much as it seems to surprise many of my colleagues, the students do not abuse that use of the option to have available time with the instructor, with the professor, at some moment when they have a specific question. You want to encourage independent work. You want to encourage collaborative work. Learners are more engaged when they receive regular exposure to the content, and they're going to get much more regular exposure to the content if they're interacting with a team collaboratively to talk about a specific problem that they're agreed to do as a project related to the course content. Collaborative learning is much more effective than competition for increasing engagement in the course material. So I want to remind you that it is not wise to model competition activities with students who are in the field of early childhood education, because then they will tend to also, with their young children in their classes, use competition as a tool for student engagement. It is not developmentally appropriate to do that. So instead, encourage working groups. But as I said before, if a student wants to work independently, allow for that. Most students will want to work in small groups, however. In-class games, you want to include, as you've seen me model every few slides, I'll have a question related to the topic for the day that then sparks interest and discussion that the students may not have really thought about in depth when they've reviewed the material prior to coming to class. Make sure you have frequent breakout rooms, allowing students to work together collaboratively, and use case studies that the students can discuss in their small groups and then present to the whole group in the synchronous session, because you don't want to give a 2-hour and 50-minute lecture anyway. So the students presenting what they learned in their small group about how to deal with the case study that you presented is a way to nurture their engagement during the learning process. Oh, well, that was an interesting example there. That was just to show you an example of an activity that you can have the students engage in as another learning activity. You, as I showed you in a couple other slides, show some sort of question, have the students pick what they think is the correct answer, and then have the group discuss it with you. The last topic we need to address is assessment and how you're going to handle testing of the activities that the students have learned to assess students for grading. Performance evaluation process has to be flexible, especially in an online environment, to better support academic integrity and to improve learner writing. I don't use multiple choice tests. I haven't in about 15 years. Instead of using multiple choice tests, I just use those multiple choice tests that come with the textbook for my every 3 to 5 slides as a way to draw the students into the topic for the day. Instead of using multiple choice tests for midterm or final exams, I only use short answer essay exams that are open book take home. so that the students can either work independently or in small groups. And for those of you who worry, oh, but that's going to lead to plagiarism, you still have access to turn it in, and students still need to make sure that they understand from the syllabus that they will be graded down if they plagiarize. That will help them enhance their ability to write in a way that is clarifying the concepts they're learning, but without copying directly from the textbook or from each other. Having each student be responsible for completing a course project is really a useful tool for assessment. I can't overemphasize that. Whether or not you allow students to do it individually or in small groups isn't important. Just make sure that you have enough latitude in the options available that students can pick the project that they want to study. Now, typically in my syllabus, I'll have roughly 20 different sample topics related to the course content that students can pick for their project. But I also allow students, and there's always 1, 2, or 3 who will want to come up with another project to do that's not on that list of 20, and I certainly accept that as well. So in conclusion, what we want to think about in terms of online learning is that this is the new normal. At least for the next 2 semesters of our lives, we're going to be dealing with an online learning environment. While it can be challenging, online learning can actually allow for an even greater exchange of ideas. Key to effective course management is having clear learning objectives and encourage the students to provide input about those learning course objectives and addressing those objectives in such a way that the students are engaged in learning the material. I encourage you to embrace the importance of nurturing self-directed learning in students and collaborative learning as a way to engage student involvement, to engender more deeper, more involved student engagement. Keeping students engaged can be a struggle, no question about it. But incorporating these ideas can stimulate more active participation and definitely greater content mastery. Here is a list of references that you can use to understand the material, and the value of self-directed learning, and the usefulness of providing students options with contracts, and how online learning can be enhanced through collaborative engagement in the learning material. So thank you for joining me on this journey today, and I hope I've been at some level helpful in you planning how you're going to keep your students more actively engaged in the learning process. Thank you for your attention.